I met Raquel at Claxo, and then we met in Santiago de Chile. I was not in her group, but we had a Peruvian American, and he told me that
Sorry. Okay.
I need to think. Maybe I've got half a liter of beer inside me. I'm forgetting the names. So he told me that Raquel is very interested in what you are doing, and there seems to be some link. So he asked me to speak to Raquel.
Yes.
So I didn't know Raquel very well, so I went and spoke to her, and Raquel said, "Yeah, maybe we'll have a meeting, and maybe you could come to Brazil." So after that, we exchanged a couple of mails, and she asked me to send my resume. And after that, I thought it was a forgotten issue. All of a sudden, I got an invitation. She says, "Come to Brazil."
Yeah.
So I couldn't believe it, and then she sent me a ticket.
Have you ever been here?
No, this is the first time.
Oh, okay.
Amazing place. So I mean, I had just a few chats, and she seemed to be very, very focused and very serious and very interested at the same time, very friendly. So I had a very good idea about her, very, very nice thoughts about her. So I just came over, and then she had sent the proposal with regard to South-South dialogues, and
Yes.
I noticed quite some time back that she was extremely committed with what she was doing. So I thought I was making the correct decision coming all the way.
And did you live in Mexico?
Yeah, I lived there for 10 years.
And how was the experience in this? Did you used to study already this South Epistemology, or
No.
you decided in Mexico to study about this?
I think I came to Mexico in 2010. I was doing international relations in India, and then for some reason I started studying Latin American studies. And then I met people from Argentina, and somebody told me, "Why are you studying Latin America in India? You should go to Latin America, and for that you must learn a language." So I decided to learn Spanish, and then got a scholarship, came to Mexico, and I was very impressed with UNAM, Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México. And then I joined there for a master's program in history. I was learning the language at the same time. I came in 2000, and I finished my master's in 2004, and then the place was so good, I found a good teacher, so I thought I'll continue with my PhD. And so I started my PhD sometime in 2004, 2005, and around 2007, I think I became very conscious that epistemological paradigms do play a role in our understanding. So that is also the time that maybe a few years before that, I ran into dialogues about Buddha. I'm not interested in Buddhism, but I am interested in Buddha. So the conversations that Buddha had with his disciples, they're registered in some philosophical text. So I was browsing through an anthology of Indian philosophy, and I found it very interesting that Buddha doesn't use theories. So his thought is not based on a theory, it's not based on a premise, there is no fundamental premise. So that means there is radical questioning. When I say radical, I mean going to the root. So you are constantly excavating. So maybe a little bit of Indian philosophy, a little bit of Western European philosophy, and a little bit about the sociology of knowledge. For example, how does knowledge gain credence? Knowledge gain credence through consensus. So if we are in a group of, let's say, 7 or 8 people, if 4 or 5 people decide that this is what we are going to do, then that group, those 4 or 5 people tend to begin to dominate what is conceived or what is perceived to be true within that group, isn't it? So in some sense, consensus, majority opinion determines what is true. So within a truth game, something is established within a game, or within a truth game, something is established as truth because there is a sociological relationship. So I realized that truth, even within a discipline, let's say history, philosophy, sociology, even the history of science, demonstrate that even within science, consensus within members of a group are important. For example, Copernicus never saw the sun and the planets moving around the sun, but he came to that conclusion theoretically. So between Copernicus and Galileo, Galileo was the first person to demonstrate through the use of the telescope that the planets were moving around the sun. So that is the first time that we have evidence, hard evidence that the planets are moving around. But even before that, Copernican paradigm is accepted as the correct paradigm. It's basically based on theory, isn't it? So, so there is an American philosopher, historian of science, called Thomas Kuhn, and he studied the history of science between Copernicus and Newton, and he's written a couple of books called The Structure of Scientific Revolution and the Copernican Revolution. And he says that he has got a number of complex arguments, but one of those minor arguments is that groups within the domain of knowledge determine what is true. And this is in the history and philosophy of science. If you look at French philosophy, you have people like Michel Foucault who work on similar lines. If you look at Western linguistics, you have people like John Searle, an American philosopher of linguistics. He also believes in truth games. Kuhn talks about paradigms, Foucault talks about discourses. So truth doesn't exist out there to be captured. Truth is created within a game. So you have a certain set of rules for basketball, and you have a certain set of rules for football. So in basketball, you don't touch the ball with the leg. In football, you don't touch the ball with your hands. So both aim at winning or scoring whatever, points or goals or whatever. So every game has a certain set of rules, and you tend to dominate the game by following those rules. So truth is something like that. So you get into a game, and your aspiration for the truth is determined by the rules of that game. For example, in the 18th century, in political philosophy, there was this concept of social contract.
Yeah.
So people come together and they decide to form a government. Mm-hmm. So there was a Scottish philosopher called David Hume. Mm-hmm. So he said, he was talking in relation to, I think, a French philosopher called Rousseau.
Yes.
So Rousseau talked about social contract, that people come together and form a government and so on. He said, that's all fine, but tell me one case in history where that has happened. Because when you look at history, governments are formed always through the use of force. Nobody comes together. People don't get together as equals and form a government. It's always through the use of force. So he said it doesn't really happen. It doesn't make sense. But he said this in the 1750s. But if you look at the history of the United States, if you look at the history of the French Revolution, people came together, they created a constitution, and they decided to form a government on the basis of social contract. So Hume thought that would never happen. But immediately, a few years after he said it, it happened. So if you look at the 20th century, the British Empire was the most powerful empire.
Yeah.
So how can you overthrow an empire that is so powerful through non-violence? So when Gandhi wrote the book, The Hind Swaraj, his political guru, his political mentor said, his political mentor was somebody called Gokhale, Gopal Krishna Gokhale. So he said, this is all nonsense what you have written. You yourself will burn the book within a year. But Gokhale had great regard for Gandhi, but he thought that Gandhi was slightly, Gandhi was a maverick. He thought that Gandhi was slightly, I think when people say that an alternative is not possible, they're just refusing to think beyond the limits of ordinary thought.